guys, welcome to the GameTouch controller feature update for 9.3x and the associated hotfixes that have been rolled out in the last few days. The first thing that got changed was the buttons were modified in the standard profile to match the new Star Citizen controls, and any of the things that don't have a default binding were removed in favor of things that automatically have a default binding on the Star Citizen. Also, the ping was changed to V, and the server-side backend was changed to have the hold press. This means the auto ping's now been updated to accommodate for that small hold in the button pushes, as well as by pushing the default radar ping a single tap while the timer is at 0, it'll just do a single ping now as well. The next thing that was added was a community feature request, which was to be able to have the power triangle be largely full screen for ease of use on smaller devices. So the way that works now is on the Flight 1 panel that you can see here. If we hold down the center hexagon for 3 seconds, you'll hear a series of beeps as it activates, and it will expand to full screen. The next thing is I changed the way that the buttons work on this screen to actually detect the edges of the hexagons and triangles. So it's a lot more accurate now when you're trying to push the buttons. If you click like even right next to the hexagons, it won't activate, but as soon as you click inside, they'll activate. The buttons around the outside are directly brought from that Flight 1 screen, so whatever you configure there, it's configured here for access to another few buttons. And then to return back to the normal configuration for the Flight 1 screen, it's just simply hold down that center hexagon again for another 3 seconds, and it will return to that. The next community feature request that was added was the ability to have a clock somewhere on the screen. And so now there's several ways. Well, essentially one way to achieve this is by typing clock as the name of any button, and then it will change that into the local time clock of whatever device that you have the client running on. Or you can also leave the name of the button and just simply put clock after it, as you see here, and that will leave the landing gear as well as the clock on that same button. And essentially, anywhere you type clock for a button name, it will add the clock underneath that. The next major feature to be added was a long-standing community request for custom panels. This is version 1, and they'll continue to expand on the functionality as later versions are released. It now replaces what was refueling, which hasn't been updated by CIG, on the main screen here, as you can see down the bottom right of the primary panels. And if we go into custom panel, and we can go to configure up the top right, it'll give us access to the green plus and red minus buttons, and we can add either a button or a radar. We can add the radar, move it around, and it functions the same as the radars on any of the other screens, and click the minus to remove the last selected element that you've had. There will also be the ability to add the other sliders for the other analog joystick controls in the future. I hope that'll be coming in the next update. So we can add a button, and then in order to move that around, you click and hold for half a second, and that'll allow you to move it, so that when you do a single press, it will allow you to actually edit the button. And here you can type in whatever name you want, just like any of the other buttons. And then again, you can change the font size, you can change the width, and you can change the height of the button to suit your needs. When we add more buttons, it remembers the size of the last button that you created, so that if you're making a grid of a certain button size, it makes it a bit easier instead of having to keep resizing every time. You will just have to redo the font size to whatever's appropriate. Here's an example, another example of creating a clock and a certain way that you can do to actually make that so that you don't have a border by changing the color. As you can see right now, we've got the color there. And then we can drag that around, resize it. And then if we go in after we've got our correct size by adjusting the font and the size of the button, we can go through and make the actual button border to be essentially invisible, and then you just have a pure clock on your custom panel. The next thing that was added, if you notice next to the clock, there's another slide out bar. This is to add additional apps that are not necessarily for Star Citizen but might be useful. In this case, so far I've added the AFK, and the AFK has also been given a default time, so you don't need to pre-configure it. On the left, we'll show you it be flashing red to indicate that AFK is still running, and on any other panel, it would also keep flashing red so that you don't lose track. And to turn it off, you just simply open it and push it again. The next thing that was added is for people who don't have the most stable networks, and that is an auto-reconnect before it kicks you to the main screen. I'm using Flight 2 panel as an example, and I've just shut down the server, and you can see it will continue to go through and connect, or try to connect, until I turn the server back on, and it will automatically reconnect. That message will be on any screen, and if you don't disconnect, then it will largely be transparent to you. If it gets to 10 reconnects, it will kick you back to the main screen. The overlay files have been updated to allow overlays for the custom panel. We'll go through now and show you an example of one I made for Aegis. As you can see, that's just the actual overlay. You can see the other things behind it, but if you do a bit of customization, you can save it as a profile, which saves all of them, which will load now. And you can see this is an example of a panel that I made just as an example for Aegis. We've got the clock down the bottom there, a few of the buttons, and the buttons up the top have been replaced to those, and then the Aegis icon down the bottom middle is also another button. Take you straight to the Flight 2 panel. Lastly, the services has been disabled temporarily for now. There wasn't really anyone using the services panel, and the code's still there, so I can bring it back relatively easily in the future. Or when CIG implements a better way to actually, maintain or use the services. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. That's the main updates for the 9.3 feature update. More to come in the future. When I get around to some more time, I'll be expanding on the custom panels and how that works. I also want to rewrite a lot of the back-end code with some new techniques that I've learned. It should hopefully decrease the load time by about 50% once it's finished. But until then, have fun and stay safe in the verse.